Typically, the first thing you do when you buy a game is you play it, a pretty natural instinct, but hold on a second, there are other choices. You could stare at it, think about playing it, forget you have it, or heck, just straight up lose it. Although, at that point, would you even still own the game? I don't know, maybe Timmy could answer that one for you. And no, I didn't steal this, paid for it with hard-earned cash. When it comes to games you own but have never played, the problem is pretty simple. The idea of owning and playing a game as it exists in your head is a lot simpler than the reality of it. Doing a backflip over my couch seems like a great hosting trick in my head, but when it comes to doing it, may not be as realistic as I thought. Owning a game is the easy part. Playing it is the hard part. But why is it hard, and why should it be hard? We're talking about video games here. Don't we enjoy this stuff? Things you have but don't use makes more sense when it's something you don't want to use, like exercise equipment or your conscience. Well, the problem when it comes to playing all your games is time. There goes time again, screwing things up. Unfortunately, time doesn't grow on trees, it grows on plants, and that's only good for a mean pot roast anyways. Our time is demanded by so many things that we can't always give as much of it to video games as we'd like to. You have things like work, responsibilities, family time, other things you like to do, listening to idiots like me talk about how we don't have enough time. Wait, don't go! When it comes to owning a game, the process is a pretty simple one for most of us. Quick example, Okami. It's a game that's similar to Zelda in structure with a cool setting and you play as a wolf. Boom, few clicks on eBay and it's yours. And how long did that take? 10 seconds? Well, that game takes over 30 hours to play through. But what if you pop in a game for 30 seconds to test it out and make sure it works? Technically, you played it. Does that count? Well, I have a feeling most people would say no. I mean, if you open up a book just to make sure the pages actually turn, does that mean you read it? Well, I sure tried to convince some of my high school teachers it did. Okay, but what about shorter games? I mean, with most of us being people who play retro games, quite a few of them are short. Maybe not easy to beat, but you can probably get through at least a handful of stages in most games. If you own games that fall into this category and you haven't played a considerable amount of these titles, assuming you want to me, that's a sign you might be bogged down by your collection. I wonder how many people have Tetris on their backlog. And what about games that are built around their multiplayer and you haven't had the chance to play with somebody yet? I mean, what's ToeJam and Earl without both ToeJam and Earl? Sometimes I also think about how there's just so many games in existence, at least when it comes to games that are worth our time of which we don't have. Especially considering that most of us own multiple consoles, there are a lot of games competing for our attention. Personally, my Sega Saturn is especially aggressive about it, and we gotta remember that each of these consoles was originally intended to be the only console we owned. Console makers tried to make their consoles to be the only game console you needed, with more games to choose from than you could ever play. They didn't want you to have the other consoles. Most of the retro gamers I see tend to have more games for any given console now than they might have had for that specific console back in the day. So let's do a quick recap. You got more games than you've ever owned before for each console, multiplied over the most consoles you've ever owned. And for the cherry on top, you've got the least amount of free time you've ever had. Something's gotta give, and it's probably going to be some of your games not being played. I suppose you could take a vacation. Yeah, where are you going? Hawaii, the Grand Canyon, Paris? Nope, I'm going to my game room. There's been a handful of times that I've mentioned I own 2 games for the DS, and people have responded like I'm some sort of freak. Well, everybody's got their preferences, and my library for each console I own isn't going to be giant. And call me crazy, I want to have a realistic chance of playing everything I own. Which, by the way, still haven't played those 2 DS games, so it's already daunting as it is. But let me ask you this, what if you're okay with having not played some of your games? You're just happy to have them. That's an option, right? I mean, we are just talking about games here. What are the consequences for having not played certain games? It's not like somebody's going to show up at your door to bust your face in. You stand in your room, look at a game, and think, oh yeah, I haven't played that yet. Most people got bigger problems in their life than whether or not they've played some of their video games. I suppose you could feel bad for having spent money on it. Quick solution to that, you could sell it or give it to someone you like. Hey, then it's no longer a game you own that you haven't played because it's no longer a game that you own. Although, may I suggest that if you have games you own that you don't plan on playing, but would like to see them become valuable, consider sending them in for my personal grading service. Double the quality for half the price. So, slap your face twice because you are not dreaming right now. And it's not just limited to games either. Not to sound boastful, but I can do it all, folks. Alright, but now it's time to talk about games on your midlog. And for those who don't know, a midlog, a term I made up, is like a backlog except that you're in the middle of playing those games. Okami is probably a good candidate for this, being a longer game. Some games may not feel like you've actually played them until you've played all of it. Question is, where does having only played part of a game leave you? You've technically played it, but you're still saying, yeah, I need to play that game. Well, that one's up to you, but I felt it was worth mentioning. I think there's definitely a FOMO factor when it comes to the games we own that we've never played too. You don't want to miss out on a game that's supposed to be good. There's a special place the community has for those people. So, while you may not be able to play a game right away, what you can do is buy it right away. And who knows, maybe you actually will play it one day. I mean, that's the idea. You never know. One day the mood to play Samba de Amigo might just hit you and the time has finally come. For some, the mere potential of maybe playing a game one day is enough to justify it being in their collection. But hold on a second. If you might want to play a game one day, then why not just wait and see if that one day ever even comes or not? It's not like these games are just going to magically not exist anymore. Well, but the prices they go for could. At least in a lot of cases. When people pull the old FOMO trigger on a game, it could be not just because they don't want to miss out on a game, but because they also don't want to miss out on the chance to buy it for an affordable price. Or if a game is already unaffordable, then before it becomes even more unaffordable. There's a moment any game collector can tell you about called the well, I guess it's never happening moment. This is when you get priced out of owning a certain game and say to yourself, well, I guess it's never happening. Speaking of which, that's pretty much the point I'm at now with this backflip over the couch idea of mine. The idea of not being able to buy a game because it costs too much sucks. I suppose that would be the argument for people just downloading ROMs, if that's your jam. You ever wonder if you'd even like some of the games you own that you've never played? I mean, you wouldn't really know for sure until you'd played it, right? Well, that opening screen when you tested the game sure blew you away though, so it's gotta be good. But yeah, some games can be quicker than others to give you an accurate idea of whether or not you'll like it. What's fun is those games that people say you need to put some ridiculous amount of time into before you can fairly determine if you like it or not. Yeah, you need to play this game for at least 50 hours before I'll accept your opinion that you don't enjoy it. Who doesn't love the risk-reward equation on that one? Okay, so we've had a lot of different thoughts and ideas flung around in this video, but one thing I'd like to clarify is that this video isn't intended to make anybody feel pressure to play certain games. If the reason you're playing a game is because you feel pressure to do so, I'd argue in most cases you've already lost. There's plenty of things in life that make us feel pressure already. We don't need video games, something that's supposed to bring us joy, added to the list. But with that, I would like to ask what some of the games are that you own but have never played. I've found that most gamers typically aren't too shy when it comes to this. I guess when it comes to gamer shame, it probably ranks pretty low compared to some other things. So with that, leave your answers down below, along with anything else you may have to say, and I will see ya in the next video.
He's the retro bird, yeah, and he's talking about video games. He's the retro bird, oh yes, and he hopes that you like